What if we say that Black people living in America and Europe are not descendants of the Black African slaves brought during the transatlantic slave trade? What if we say that you were always lied to in schools, colleges, universities, and in the media? Perhaps that will be hard to believe because no other explanation exists. However, a groundbreaking latest study has brought a watershed moment. This study reveals that 98% of Black people living in America have Native American roots. In other words, Black African Americans are actually Native Americans whose ancestors existed before Columbus reached America. Yes, this completely changes everything. But what else does this study reveal that you should know about? Welcome to a new episode of Black Afric Diary, a channel where we talk about Black African history, culture, arts, and civilization. It's a place where you will see the real picture of Black Africa, its stories, and the events defining it. In this episode, we will tell you about a study that reveals Black people in America are not descendants of Black African slaves, but of hidden native Black original tribes. Let's get started. The widely accepted story of the transatlantic slave trade focuses on the mass importation of Africans to America. However, a lesser-known and often overlooked part of history tells a different story. Before Columbus arrived in 1492, millions of native Black Americans, also known as Black Indians, inhabited the American continent. But after 1492, these populations seemed to vanish. Historical records reveal that many of these individuals were captured and shipped to Europe and Africa as Indian slaves. This reverse trade challenges the traditional narrative, suggesting that the story of the slave trade we have been taught might be backward. Instead of Africans being brought to America, it appears that Black Indians were taken from America to Europe and subsequently traded to Africa. This reverse trade process started with European colonizers capturing and exporting native Black Americans to Europe. From there, they were sent to Africa and traded as commodities in exchange for African resources. These Black Indians, now erroneously identified as African Americans, were later shipped back to America and labeled as African slaves. This crucial aspect of history is frequently neglected in school curriculums, leaving a significant gap in our understanding of the transatlantic slave trade. Every European nation that colonized North America exploited Indian slaves for labor-intensive purposes such as construction, plantations, and mining. Historical records, especially those from South Carolina, provide some of the most authentic documentation of this practice. South Carolina, initially established as the English colony of Carolina in 1670, played a significant role in this dark chapter of history. Between 1650 and 1730, it is estimated that at least 50,000 Indians, possibly more, were exported by the English to their Caribbean outposts. Many of these shipments were concealed to avoid paying government tariffs and taxes. This extensive trade meant that during the period between 1670 and 1717, more Indians were exported than Africans were imported into the colonies. The impact on native tribes was devastating. Entire tribes in the southern coastal regions were decimated due to slavery, more so than from disease or war. In 1704, a law was passed that conscripted Indian slaves to fight in colonial wars long before the American Revolution. This conscription thrust Native Americans into the strategies of colonial powers aiming for economic control. The fur trade in the Northeast, the English plantation system in the South, and the Spanish mission system in Florida all contributed to major disruptions in Indian communities. Displaced Indians from the fur trade in the North migrated south, where plantation owners armed them to hunt slaves living in Spanish mission communities. The manipulation of the slave trade by the French, English, and Spanish for their advantage exacerbated these disruptions. Colonial powers exploited the slave trade to negotiate freedom for slaves in exchange for peace, friendship, and military alliances. This exploitation added another layer of complexity and tragedy to the already devastating impacts of slavery on Native American populations. The British formed alliances with various Native American tribes during their colonization of North America. One notable example is their relationship with the Chickasaw tribe in Georgia. The the Chickasaw were surrounded by hostile groups and conducted extensive slave raids in the lower Mississippi Valley. They sold the native black Indian slaves to the English, which served two purposes: reducing the black Indian population and preventing the French from arming these tribes against British interests. The British viewed this method as a more effective way to civilize the Native Americans compared to the efforts of French missionaries, who focused on religious conversion. The Indian slave trade was vast, stretching from Spanish-controlled New Mexico to the Great Lakes in the north. Historians believe that nearly every tribe in this expansive region participated in the slave trade, either as captives or as traders. This trade was a crucial element of the colonial strategy to depopulate the land and make way for European settlers. One of the earliest examples occurred in 1636 after the Pequot War, where 300 Pequots were massacred, and the survivors were sold into slavery and sent to Bermuda. Major slaving ports included Boston, Salem, Mobile, and New Orleans. From these ports, Indians were shipped to various destinations. The English sent them to Barbados, the French to Martinique and Guadeloupe, and the Dutch to the Antilles. Indian slaves were also sent to the Bahamas, known as breaking grounds, from where they might be transported back to places like New York or Antigua. Before we continue further, tell us, are you enjoying the video? If yes, please like and share the video and subscribe to our channel to watch more videos on Black Africa. Let's continue now. Historical records show that Indians were considered poor slaves by the colonizers. When not transported far from their homelands, they often escaped and found refuge with other Indian communities. They also died in significant numbers during transatlantic journeys and succumbed to European diseases. By 1676, Barbados had banned Indian slavery, citing their too bloody and dangerous an inclination to remain here. As the Indian slave trade declined and was replaced by the African slave trade in the late 1700s, a new dynamic emerged. Native American women began to intermarry with imported Africans, producing mixed-race offspring. Over time, these individuals' native identities became obscured. The Colonial project aimed to erase the presence of Indians, and bureaucratic changes in public records began labeling these mixed-race individuals as colored. In states like Virginia, public records such as birth or death certificates initially recorded individuals as Indians. However, these records were often changed to colored over time. Census takers who determined a person's race by their appearance frequently recorded mixed-race individuals as simply black, not Indian. This bureaucratic erasure means that today, many people of Native American heritage, particularly in the Northeast, are not recognized by society at large. This history suggests that a significant portion of the Black population in America today are descendants of native Black Indian people. The intermarriage and subsequent mixed-race offspring blurred the lines between Native Americans and Africans. As colonial administrations reclassified these individuals, their Native American identities were lost in the official records. This process is comparable to the experiences of the freedmen of the Cherokee and other 5 civilized tribes, documented on the Dawes Roll Cards by the United States Dawes Roll Administration. In early September 2015, a significant historical event unfolded as 645 Native American tribes were awarded a total of $940 million in settlements against the U.S. Department of Justice. This landmark decision marked a culmination of legal battles where tribes sought compensation for the mismanagement of natural resources and funds held in trust by the U.S. government. The settlements were a recognition of the long-standing grievances and financial losses suffered by these tribes over many decades. Behind this settlement lies a deeper, often overlooked story. The U.S. government had quietly established a deadline, December 31st, 2014, for individuals of Native American descent, sometimes labeled as colored, Negro, Black, or left blank on their birth certificates, to make claims for land and identity. This deadline was set amidst concerns that a broader understanding and acknowledgement of Native American heritage could potentially lead to demands for reparations and land rights on a much larger scale. Despite the passing of this deadline, many Native Americans continue to pursue legal claims through the U.S. Supreme Court and international bodies like the United Nations. These ongoing legal battles reflect the persistence and determination of Native American communities to assert their rights and seek justice for historical injustices. The question of the origins of Black Indian Americans ties into broader discussions about ancestry and heritage in the United States. Dr. David Imhotep, a pioneering historian in ancient African ancestry, challenges conventional historical narratives by arguing that all humans, including Americans, trace their roots back to Africa. This perspective challenges traditional American history books that often begin with narratives focused on cowboys and Indians, missing a crucial earlier chapter, the presence and influence of Africans in ancient America. Imhotep's views are echoed and expanded upon by historian Ivan van Sertima in his influential work, They Came Before Columbus. Van Sertima presents compelling evidence suggesting an early African presence in the Americas long before Columbus's famous voyage in 1492. He explores the sophisticated navigation and shipbuilding techniques of ancient Africans that could have enabled transatlantic voyages. Cultural parallels in art, language, and religious practices between Native Americans and Africans further support his thesis of historical connections and exchanges. Moreover, Van Sertima talks about the archaeological findings and historical accounts that indicate the transportation of plants, animals, and textiles between Africa and the Americas. These exchanges suggest a significant and sustained interaction between the two continents, challenging the notion of a pristine, isolated America before European contact. The evidence compiled by Van Sertima, including diaries, journals, and oral histories of explorers referencing African peoples in the New World, builds a compelling case for an understanding of early transatlantic interactions. This historical perspective not only enriches our understanding of pre-Columbian America, but also prompts a reconsideration of the diverse origins and influences that shaped American history long before the arrival of European settlers. Numerous historical accounts substantiate Ivan van Sertima's theory regarding early African presence in the Americas. A notable example dates back to the 14th century, when the Malian Empire dispatched an impressive fleet in 1310, comprising 200 master boats and an equal number of supply vessels. This expedition highlighted the advanced maritime prowess of West African civilizations at that time. Additionally, in 1311, a sea voyage led by a Mandingo king further underscored deliberate exploration efforts by African leaders, showcasing significant engagements in transoceanic exploration long before the European Age of Discovery. The cultural and technological impacts of these African explorers on the societies encountered in the Americas are evident. Dr. David Imhotep, in his influential work, The First Americans Were Africans, expands on these themes, advocating a profound reassessment of traditional historical narratives. He emphasizes the importance of scientific evidence, including genetic studies, ancient artifacts, and geological findings, which indicate the presence of Africans in both North and South America well before the voyages of the Vikings or Christopher Columbus. One compelling piece of evidence highlighted by Dr. Imhotep is a photograph from the HMS Challenger expedition, displayed at the Natural History Museum in London, depicting African explorers in Tierra del Fuego. This photograph serves as tangible proof of Africans' historical presence in the southernmost regions of South America. Beyond scientific evidence, the cultural continuity and traditions of Black and Indigenous peoples in the Americas further validate their interconnected histories. In cities like New Orleans, for instance, the Mardi Gras Indians exemplify the fusion of African and Native American cultural elements that have persisted for centuries. These traditions reflect a complex identity often overlooked in mainstream historical narratives. The identity of Black people in the Americas defies simple categorization. Terms such as Afro-indigenous, Black native, Indigenous and Black, or Black with tribal identity, illustrate the ways individuals embrace and embody their dual heritages. This recognition challenges societal norms that seek to classify individuals into rigid racial categories based solely on physical appearance or perceived authenticity. Throughout history, Black and Indigenous ancestors have formed communities, forged relationships, and collectively resisted various forms of oppression unique to their experiences. From early interactions between Africans and Native peoples to enduring struggles against colonialism and slavery, These communities have demonstrated resilience and solidarity. Movements such as abolition, the establishment of free towns, cross-cultural alliances, kinship networks, and community building have been crucial in their ongoing quest for freedom and justice. What are your thoughts on Black people's ancestry? Do you think they are descendants of African slaves or native Black Indian original tribes? In the comment section right below, share your thoughts on why Black people were told they are descendants of African slaves. Was it to make them feel inferior? Do you want to watch more videos like this one? If yes, subscribe to our channel and press the bell icon next to it. We bring videos on Black Africa, its history, rich arts and culture, and things the world should know about. Thanks for watching, and until the next video, stay tuned.